Now, my son, may the Lord be with you and give you success as you follow his directions in building the temple of the Lord your God. And may the Lord give you wisdom and understanding, that you may obey the law of the Lord your God as you rule over Israel. For you will be successful if you carefully obey the decrees and regulations that the Lord gave to Israel through Moses. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or lose heart. He says, may the Lord give you wisdom and understanding, that you may obey. For you will be successful if you carefully obey the decrees and regulations the Lord gave to Israel. So, he's also saying, look, I've made all these preparations, the stage is set, but more importantly than all that, you gotta obey God and, keep track of your relationship with Him for it to really be successful. What's up, cool people? My name is Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. First Chronicles chapter 22. So this is coming after David's had a bunch of military success, and that has also contributed to a bunch of A, peacemaking around them, and B, resource gathering that would go into making the temple and or buying other things that would be needed for the temple. Anyway, so friendly reminder, this is originally intended for Israelite exiles that, as we saw towards the end of 2 Kings, the Assyrians and Babylonians took over different parts of where God's people were living and had, scattered them throughout the associated kingdoms. And this is probably coming a few hundred years later to kind of remind the people, here's what happened and how things went wrong. And also maybe kind of highlight along the way that, yeah, it's because we stopped following God. We need to get back to that. Here's a bunch of examples of how things went well when we did things God's way and how they didn't go well when we strayed from that. So, I'm noticing the first word here is then. This comes after the previous chapter mentioned the one census being taken, and as punishment for that, there was a plague across Israel, killed 70,000 people, but then in the process of kind of getting that to stop, David builds an altar on the threshing floor of a guy named Araunah. And so, after that, and, building the altar and making some offerings there, then we get to verse 1 here. Then David said, this will be the location for the temple of the Lord God, and the place of the altar for Israel's burnt offerings. As opposed to what it said before in the previous chapter, let me get back to that. Because it had mentioned in chapter 21, verse 29, that the tabernacle of the Lord and the altar of burnt offering that Moses had made were located at the place of worship in Gibeon. Obviously, this place just outside Jerusalem at this threshing floor was not the same place. But David is now declaring that that's where the temple is going to be, and the altar for burnt offerings will be, I guess, at that plot of land where the threshing floor was. Which, David bought it, so he can do with that what he wants. On to verse 2. So David gave orders to call together the foreigners living in Israel, and he assigned them the task of preparing finished stone for building the temple of God. David provided large amounts of iron for the nails that would be needed for the doors. Sorry, man, that's a longer sentence than I was ready to read with that tone of voice. Anyway, David provided large amounts of iron for the nails that would be needed for the doors in the gates and for the clamps, and he gave more bronze than could be weighed. He also provided innumerable cedar logs, for the men of Tyre and Sidon had brought vast amounts of cedar to David. So, David gave the orders. David provided large amounts of the... Okay. So, that's, I guess, just talking about some of the resources that David put into the temple building efforts. Okay, verse 5. David said, "My son Solomon is still young and inexperienced, and since the temple to be built for the Lord must be a magnificent structure, famous and glorious throughout the world, I will begin making preparations for it now." So David collected vast amounts of building materials before his death. Then David sent for his son Solomon and instructed him to build a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel. "My son, I wanted to build a temple to honor the name of the Lord my God," David told him. "But the Lord said to me, 'You have killed many men in the battles you have fought, and since you have shed so much blood in my sight, you will not be the one to build a temple to honor my name. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace. I will give him peace with his enemies in all the surrounding lands. His name will be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel during his reign. He is the one who will build a temple to honor my name. He will be my son, and I will be his father, and I will secure the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever." So, I'm not entirely sure it said in the prior chapter of First Chronicles that the name of the one to build the temple would be Solomon. That I don't recall that being part of the, like, prophecy type thing from God. But, I mean, obviously it's known now that Solomon is going to take over the throne after David, so since God did say he would be one of David's sons, that's obvious now. So, David's now basically prepping Solomon for the notion of building this temple, because otherwise, if he doesn't tell Solomon that he intended to do this, and that there was, like a promise from God regarding this, it might not happen. Because how are you supposed to do something that you didn't hear anything about? Note there at Solomon. Solomon sounds like and is probably derived from the Hebrew word for peace. Huh. Okay. Not sure I remember seeing that note before. But that makes sense. Because of, all that God said about, it being a time of peace when the temple would be built. So, yeah. And then I guess we'll continue on with David's words to Solomon in verse 11. "Now, my son, may the Lord be with you and give you success as you follow his directions in building the temple of the Lord your God. And may the Lord give you wisdom and understanding, that you may obey the law of the Lord your God as you rule over Israel. For you will be successful if you carefully obey the decrees and regulations that the Lord gave to Israel through Moses. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or lose heart. I have worked hard to provide materials for building the temple of the Lord. Nearly 4,000 tons of gold, 40,000 tons of silver, and so much iron and bronze that it cannot be weighed. I have also gathered timber and stone for the walls, though you may need to add more. You have a large number of skilled stonemasons and carpenters and craftsmen of every kind. You have expert goldsmiths and silversmiths and workers of bronze and iron. Now begin the work, and may the Lord be with you. Then David ordered all the leaders of Israel to assist Solomon in this project. "The Lord your God is with you," he declared. "He has given you peace with the surrounding nations. He has handed them over to me, and they are now subject to the Lord and his people. Now seek the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Build the sanctuary of the Lord God so that you can bring the ark of the Lord's covenant and the holy vessels of God into the temple built to honor the Lord's name." So this is pretty much just like, to put it very briefly, this is like the official passing of the torch, regarding the building of the temple. And saying that it has David's stamp of approval, along with, all the reminders of God's promises related to this. But yeah, and also in amongst this, in David's words to Solomon, he says, "May the Lord give you wisdom and understanding, that you may obey. For you will be successful if you carefully obey the decrees and regulations the Lord gave to Israel." So, he's also saying, look, I've made all these preparations, the stage is set, but more importantly than all that, you gotta obey God and, keep track of your relationship with him for it to really be successful. If you obey God, it'll work out. And, David had enough experiences in his own life to see that pattern of, gee, if I do what God says to do, it goes well. And if I do something that God doesn't want, things don't end well. So it's got mention of the materials here. This is probably going to give, he mentions 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000 talents of silver. And these are just the approximate weight equivalents that are mentioned, in the verses here and also within the brackets in the note. So yeah, lots and literally tons of gold and silver. And that's just what could be counted. Never mind the iron and bronze that couldn't be weighed because there's too much of it. And plenty of wood and stone for other stuff. So yeah, it's like, all right, we should have everything we need for this. Time to hop to it. Let's get this thing rolling. I'm putting you in charge. Get it done. And then also not just saying that to Solomon, but also kind of saying to other leaders of Israel that, hey, Solomon's gonna need some help with this, obviously, because it's a massive undertaking. So make sure that you help him out to the best of your ability. But God's with you in this. God has stated that he wants it, or that it will happen, during Solomon's time as king. So yeah, that's 1 Chronicles chapter 22 for you. Okay, so long story short, this chapter was all about preparing to build the temple, both with, materials and things like that, as well as, mentally preparing the leadership, Solomon especially, to, undertake the task and to lead the way for that. So yeah, there's really not too much else to say as far as a general summary of it. So as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you want to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description for links to social media pages all across the internet, ways to keep up with my activity, and of course there's stuff for my supporter page down there. There's a link to that. You can sign up for a membership, help me out with what I'm doing a little bit, maybe help me buy some new games to play or upgrade my streaming equipment or things like that. And you'll get some kickbacks in exchange if you take the membership route. But single-time donations are available and appreciated as well. There's also a link to my Discord server down there where you can chat about whatever you want between streams and videos and stuff like that. And of course, down below the description and all that stuff, leave your thoughts and questions in the comment section. So that's going to do it. I hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.